Hey everyone, welcome to The Grind. We are starting a new series where we're going to be looking at the covenants in the Bible. There are actually 8 covenants, if I remember correctly, and we're going to go through 4 of them. And the first one today will be we're going through the Abrahamic covenant. But before that, let's talk a little about covenants, and because I think it's feels like it's a Old Testament word, or a very biblical word that we don't necessarily throw out in everyday language. But there's a difference between a covenant and contract. But we're going to talk a difference between those two, because I think people are like, oh, is it the same, is it not, or whatever. But anyways, first, maybe just to break the ice a little bit, but have you guys found yourself stuck in a contract that you regretted?
Yes, I did.
Oh, to tell us more.
Yeah, but thankfully it was years ago.
Okay.
After graduating from uni, they, I don't know where they got my contact, but some sort of publishing company called me and say, oh, would you like to sign up for this business English course?
Ooh, like teaching it, or?
No. It's a online learning material.
Oh, okay.
So you can complete one class every week.
Oh, okay.
Like
All right. Business English. Got it.
But it was quite expensive. And then I thought, maybe I do need this. And then I signed up for it, paid for it, and then I did one class. And then I thought, oh, this is useless.
Oh.
And I never used it again.
Oh no.
That's rough.
Oh no. Yeah, I don't even know what business English is, to be honest. It's just terms they use in econ. I mean, I don't know. Or proper English you need to use in writing documents. Anyways, I mean, yeah, I've always wondered what business English is. I would say a contract that I kind of regretted was probably my gym contract a couple of years ago.
Oh, yeah.
I was quite a bit I don't want to say bitter, but so when fitness first closed down, all of us were like, oh, I gotta find a new gym. So I found a gym that was close by my home, and I thought, oh, I guess it's convenient and stuff. But the thing is, you had to do a 2-year contract, and you had to pay the money up front, and I was like, okay, and I think if you average it out, it's still decent. That'll be the average price I'll pay for the gym, but also it's 2 years contract. So okay, fine, I'll just do it, And I think I kind of was regretting the decision a little bit as the time progressed, because I just this gym was kind of behind the times in a way where when the gyms were allowing people not to work, basically don't need to work out with masks, this gym still enforced that rule. I was pretty bitter about that. It's people was like, why you still need to wear a mask at the gym while you work? I was like, yes. And it only was maybe 3-4 months after it was done, then they lifted it, right? And then there was very minimal machines. And then it was just frustrating, because I'm every single time I want to use a machine, someone's using it, and I just have to wait. And I don't like waiting. I just want to just go and be done. And then later on, they decided to do some renovation. And I thought, okay, I guess they're including more stuff, whatever. And then when the guy was telling me, oh, actually, this is it. We've made the gym smaller. I was like, are you kidding me? And then oh, by the way, and then they're basically trying to get me to renew, and I was like,
I'm not gonna settle down.
No way.
No.
No, I ain't renewing. First of all, there's no space to warm up in that place anymore. I gotta go warm up maybe at home before I go to the gym. And number 2 is there's less machines, less space, everything's cramped, and then they're asking me to pay again a fee that's up front. And I was like, no thanks. And I was speaking to someone recently about that gym, and then they're like, oh, that gym, they're probably gonna close down soon. I was like, thank God. Because I don't want to be stuck in a whole situation all the other gyms where it's oh, you sign up and then you get stuck.
Yeah. my girlfriend got stuck in the gym as well.
Oh, no.
Before. Also paid up front, also, I don't know, 1 year, 2-year contract. And then the worst thing is the coaches keep having excuses for not being available for classes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, sometimes I'm worried, but any gym is asking me to pay up front, right from the get-go, I'm like, oh,
Nope.
I don't know. Yeah.
Just go to
Go somewhere else. Go somewhere else.
I feel I can relate to both of you. I can't really think of a specific one. I can relate to yours that I've also signed up for some editing tools online, like some resources, which they up front it looks good, but the system to integrate it into my editing software was miserable. So in the end, I was like, "Yep, waste of money." And I feel, and same for like, I feel I also have a few gym stories. Can I say that I regret certain contracts of friends? I'm kidding.
You could.
No, as you were saying your gym one, I remember where I was with my Kingdom group, and they're like, "Hey, let's do a Metcon," and I was like, "Oh, a Metcon, what's that?" And they said, "Oh, it's just a workout."
It's metabolic conditioning.
Yeah. Anyways, I was like, you know what? Sure, let's give it a try. I can improve my health, and this is coming from like I think a year or two of just like slumber where I did not really do much exercise. And so and my friends were like hyping me, "Oh, it's gonna be fun, it's gonna be great."
It was fun.
Yeah, for them. Pet was there. I was barely holding on.
Yeah, we're great friends. So I think like the term like covenant and contract sometimes like, you know, some people might use it interchangeably. It's like, oh, it's a basically agreement, right? So, you know, just a set of agreements that you have between two parties, but really, yeah, covenant is more than that. Like for you guys, might throw out the word covenant. What does that mean to you?
Covenant?
Yeah.
I think the difference between covenant and contract, I feel contract is like, it's a agreement that there are going to be mutual and equal benefits, like emphasis on the equal part. And then covenant is where it's an agreement, but then it could result in one party having more of the benefits, I feel, or maybe even all the benefits and the other one doesn't even do it. But most importantly, it's like it's out of relationship, and it's that respect and love that kind of keeps them together in that agreement. Yeah.
Well, I don't really know. I should brush up on my knowledge about that. But like the most often I hear about the word covenant is in wedding ceremonies. When the pastors say, "This is a holy covenant, and what God joins, man cannot separate."
Yeah. So it's obviously very different from contract because covenant is a relationship where two parties make a binding agreement. Hence, you know, oftentimes you hear it at wedding ceremonies. So how it is different from a contract is it involves a relationship, because I think sometimes with contracts it's just you pay the money, you get my services, done, deal, no relationship, right? And then it involves an agreement, but man can never negotiate with God, and then it is binding once accepted. Man can only accept it or reject it. So. And basically the heart of all covenants is that God's basically saying, I will be their God and they shall be my people. That's the heart of the covenant when God makes them with men. So understanding that context, how it's like relational, how it's binding, how actually we're the ones that either accept it or reject it. Like in what ways do you think the concept of covenant impacts your relationship with God compared to a contractual approach?
I think that's why the icebreaker is a good question, because like in the covenant of God, it's like it's not something you'll regret, you know.
Yeah. It's true.
The better.
Yeah.
I think like the funny way of me seeing this is like, you know, when you apply for a job, you're kind of like rolling the dice, gambling of whether you get like good boss, right? And so I feel like a contract, you run the risk of having a boss that would cover their own butt, you know, they only care about themselves. But the covenant of God is like, you know, getting lucky with a boss who will actually like fight for you, you know, that they are there for your well-being as well.
Same feelings, because the usual contracts are so they sound so cold, like all these terms and conditions are to protect the draft. Or the company.
The company who provided you the agreement.
You can't defame us. You can't do this. You can't do that. You have to be here. But then, God's covenant is super warm. And actually, the most extraordinary thing, like what Pastor Ed said, is if we fail, God suffers. God suffers the punishment rather than us suffering. Like what he described when Abraham cut the animals to half. supposedly they both should go through the animals, go through the sacrifices, but actually only the pot and the flaming torch went through it. So only God went through it.
Yeah, I would like, sometimes with contracts there's like fine print that is like, oh no, I missed it, I gotta pay this thing. I don't think there's fine print when God makes a covenant with man. He's basically black and white. It's like, hey, if you do this and this, I will fulfill this and this. Do you accept or do you not? Like very clear. There's no like, actually, since you said yes to A, then actually B is going to happen, but because you didn't do B, then C or D is not going to fall through, etc. So I think like when you understand that the covenant is very relational, that I think that would in a way shape the way I approach God, that he's not trying to get something out of me. He's not trying to, sell me something, or there's some like, hidden agenda. That basically God's pretty straightforward. Like, he desires a relationship with us. He wants us to be his people. And so he's basically laying all the cards on the table. And I think there's that realness, that depth to the relationship. It's not just superficial. There's actually something more than just like, yes, sure, we'll have a relationship with God, but then there's actually more that comes with it. So I think it's almost like gets you think like, how do I not take this relationship with God light? How do I not take a double negative? Basically, don't take this relationship with the Lord lightly. That's something that gets me to think as well. I was like, please help me not say anything that's heretical. So today we're going to focus on Abraham. It's like, and as we mentioned, Abraham, and God made a covenant with him, and we read this in Genesis like 12:1-3. For sake of time, I'm not going to read through all of it, but basically he's promising land, children, and blessings. And Abraham believed. So let's talk a little bit about the nature of true faith as revealed in Abraham's encounter with God. Like, what do you think he was required to do to keep his side of the covenant?
Believe and have faith. I mean, like, I feel, okay, to me, it really shows God's nature, that he's willing to do, when you go to university, right? It's like, it's a group project, and it's like you delegate it so that each person's job is equal. But then God's here saying like, I will do 99.9% of the work. All you gotta do is that 0.1%. And that's like just the grace of God and just how good his character is. And so Abraham's 0.1% is simply to just believe, like a few verses before, right? It's saying God's gonna do this. I'm gonna give you a child, even though you're old and you have, it's like all your will is gonna be given to your servant. It goes, no, I'm gonna give you a son. And then Abraham's like, that's not possible. So even like there's like so much unbelief that Abraham had, he still like pushed through, and all he did was that 0.1%, and because of that, God fulfilled his promise. Yeah,
but actually I think that 0.001% actually is still very difficult.
Of course.
Because later on you see that he waited for so long for a son, but it still hasn't come. And then he went his own way to try to fulfill this promise. But
imagine Abraham in our time. Look and count the stars. Oh, air pollution.
So we'll talk a little about the whole stars thing. If you're like kind of like, oh, why did Dom talk about stars now? Because I was looking at the whole story of Abraham before, because I was doing the whole sermon about like the fear of God and Abraham's sacrifice and so on. And because like his 0.001% of like believing in God involved him leaving all that he knew. And that takes a lot of courage. I mean, if he didn't understand or believe or know who God is, like why would he even leave behind everything that he's comfortable with to journey to a place that he doesn't even know, to venture with a God who has no idea who he is? Because bear in mind that Abraham came from like, where God is not exactly present. Like it's, he's surrounded by people like pagan, worship and stuff like that. So it's like there's this guy, a God who tells him like, hey, leave everything behind, and obey me. So it really was faith and stepping out in that, and I guess that was counted to him as righteousness. So he believed, right? And so when it's like about the circumstances surrounding God asking Abraham to count the stars. All right, so in Genesis 15, it's basically talking about God's covenant with Abraham, and I think he made a covenant with Abraham like a few times before, throughout like Genesis. So basically, if you look at 5 to 6, he basically brings Abraham outside. He says, looks towards heaven, and number the stars if you're able to number them. And then he said, so shall your offspring be. And he believed the Lord, and he counted to him as righteousness. Now, the interesting thing is that the sun was shining the whole time. Well, how do we know this? It says in verse 12, as the sun was going down. So just imagine God brought Abraham out in daytime and said, count the stars.
Just look up and gets blinded.
Actually, well, because I was thinking about it, if he just sees the sun and he only had one
Just
son.
one?
And he just had one son. Right?
Maybe,
technically
maybe.
he saw two anyways,
What
we
is this?
digress.
The Bible's what if?
Like he saw two, like one, he saw the moon and he saw the sun, and then that was it. That's all he got.
that's two.
Yeah, that was two. Well, actually, the moon is not a star, so.
But he wouldn't have known at that time.
Moving on. Okay, so basically that was the deal, right? So like, exactly, Coldplay. So if you think about it, like, just thinking about this circumstance, right? God brings him out, says, count the stars, this is your offspring, the number of your offspring. And to be honest, like, his covenant's like, oh, I'm going to multiply, bless your nations, multiply your off, blah, 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 and stuff like that, right? So it's just like, I can't see. And okay, so it really is belief. I start thinking about like faith and obedience. Like, how do you guys think that relates to each other?
Well, if you obey without faith, that's just kind of following the rules. And going back to our icebreaking question, that would be similar to I'm fulfilling what the contract wants me to do. I'm
True.
fulfilling what this company is holding me responsible for, but I don't really care that much if out of this contract.
I think the way I would understand it is that like obedience, is that if you do something wrong, there's going to be consequences. But when you come to on the topic about faith with God, you turn it down. There's no there are consequences, but he's not going to be like, how dare you smite? No. Like I think that's the difference, that there's grace with faith.
I like what you said. It's like if you obey without faith, then it's really just following a list of rules. Because the way I guess I would see it is that you need to have faith in who God is before you choose to obey. So if you have no faith in that person, why would you even obey that person, right? So
Fear of consequence.
Fear of consequence. That is definitely one. Maybe initially, Abraham had that fear of consequence. Like, if I don't do it, maybe this God might smite me, and so I better go. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of fear thrown in, right? And again, going back to my sermon back in the day, like earlier on this year, like when I talked about like the difference between faith and fear, and how like the fear of the Lord, stemmed from actual fear to like actual reverence. Anyways, so. That's a whole another topic, but basically, if you don't know who God is, if you don't have faith in him, it makes it really hard to obey and believe that what he has is good for you, that actually he's a God, this covenant that he set before you is actually legit. It's not something that he's made up. It's not something that he's trying to hook you in and just like, oh, psych, like there's all these terms and conditions, but that you need to do. To be fair though, in order for him to receive what God has laid out in the covenant, there was something that Abraham needed to do, which was to believe. I think that's simple as that, to believe, to trust God, and that's why God counted to him as righteousness. So I think it's like faith and obedience is really I guess twined. And also, like, has there been a circumstance in your life where you really felt like, wow, this is really, I'm struggling to believe God here, like this is but you know that you have to. Like, okay, for example, God says he's a God who can heal, that nothing's impossible for him, right? Sometimes I find it hard to believe, not saying I don't, but I find it a struggle to believe, and I've shared this multiple times already, is, when I'm seeking God for healing in my mom, right? Yeah. God says he can heal, he's got sins and inequities on the cross, like, all things are possible with him, he works all good towards those who love him. All of these conditions apply to my mom, but why does he not do it? So that's something that I struggle to believe God in sometimes. There are days I'm like, that's fine, I still choose to worship and praise him, but then also, why? So that's an example.
Yeah. Same for me, also healing. My skin has been broken and swollen for more than half a year now. Yeah, it just fluctuates. Sometimes better, but then it will go 2 steps back, 1 step better and 2 steps back. Yeah.
But we all face, hard times. So are there specific promises from God that you hold on to during those times, and how do they influence your daily life?
I think one that really helped me a lot of times is that, like, I'm not alone during the difficult times. And which is why I really appreciate the worship song Another in the Fire. Like, there are so many times that I think, like, growing up, you always like think that whenever you're like in that difficult time that you're alone, right? Because if you feel alone, and I think that worship song is just such a good reminder to be like, hey, you're not alone, that God's suffering there with you. And so so God works for the good of those who love him. So as long as I do my part, I know that he will help me prevail somehow. Yeah.
For me, it's usually reminders about God as a person. So for example, Isaiah 9, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Almighty God, the Everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace. And in Isaiah 55, God's thoughts are not my thoughts, neither are my ways his ways, and the heavens are higher than the earth, so God's way are higher than our ways and our thoughts. Sometimes it's very difficult to grasp those, but you just have to believe it, and to see, because of our limited understanding, what we see now may not be the whole thing, and our time now may be a few years are not what God sees, like without the time constraint. And so if talking about worship songs, I also like really hold on to a song called Elohim recently, by Hillsong, especially in the bridge, where like we just keep on proclaiming God is Almighty, maker of the earth. He is the Lord of hosts, heaven's king. His kingdom stands above every power and every living soul, and his love is like the sun. Speaking of counting the stars and shining over all. So it's just like reminders of God's authority, sovereignty, and what he has done before, his identity, to remind me of the hope that can be put on him.
So interestingly enough, the song that I was listening to, on the way to work is Promises by Maverick City Music, and it says, like, one of the lyrics is like, from the rising sun, to the setting sun, I will praise your name. And yesterday I was reading how I think St. Augustine said, like, we should be hallelujah from head to foot. Basically, it's like praising God no matter what. And I would say that, one of the promises I hold on to is that his love is steadfast, and that's a common theme that's coming up when I'm reading Psalms, is that his love is steadfast. And what is steadfast? It's not like, psychotic, it's not chaotic, it's steadfast. You can rely on it. So I think that's a promise that, I hold on to, as well as another one that's like, wait upon the Lord, and those who wait upon the Lord will renew your strength, and yeah, and grow in courage. And I'm like, sometimes I'm like, man, I do get tired just waiting on God. But waiting on God is not just sitting there. It's continually seeking Him, and spending time with Him. And one of my favorite verses, and I think I mentioned this before, is that in First or Second Chronicles, I forget now, is that I do not know what to do, but my eyes are on you. I feel like that's my theme song. It's like a theme of my life is like, I don't know what I'm doing, God. I want to look to you. And if you think about it, if you spend all your time just looking at all your problems, you're never going to see what God is doing.
Yeah.
So I think it's like lift up. So hence Abraham, he could look at all the issues that could going on. Like, my wife is barren. You asking me to leave my home, and they're telling me that you're gonna multiply my land. And then God's like, look up, look at the stars. This is gonna be plentiful. And it's like, yeah. So he chooses to believe. Maybe he couldn't see what was going on. Yes, maybe he could see one singular star, the sun. But then he was like, he believed. So can we still believe even though we don't see all that we hope to see? Right? And I think if we go to like Jesus, he told he told us to look up in the harvest, like John 4, right? The harvest is white. It's plentiful for harvest, right? Let me quote it right. Give me a second.
I wonder if like watching the stars at night would have made the whole thing more three-dimensional, or is it the same issue as the people before seeing miracles but still don't believe?
I don't know. Maybe like God wanted to make a point, because if God made Abraham see the stars at night, then he could see it, so he could physically count it. So it's based on his works, right? In that sense, maybe. So, yeah, food for thought. So if we were to tie this into Jesus and John chapter 4, where Jesus was basically saying, I think it was in verse 34. Give me a second as I scroll down. Yeah, I said, look, I tell you, lift up your eyes and see that the fields are white for harvest. So sometimes we can get caught up in our own thing that we don't see that actually there's a harvest field right there for us to go out and tell the good news. And I think God's covenant is just not meant for a select few; it's meant for all. And again, like going back to what we said at the beginning, is up to man to reject or accept it. So yeah, I think sometimes we can be challenged to share and tell people about God. And I think this is just a reminder, like, hey, look up, just see what God is doing. And sometimes we may not see exactly and understand, and we want to try to trust in our own works, but I think just hold on to God, that at the end of the day He wants to be our God so that we can be His people.
I just thought of a funny thing that like, what if like God says like, look up and count the stars. He looks up and goes, there's no stars now. But if I wait, does that mean if I wait I will see His promises?
Yeah.
So I wonder like on that funny idea that what if like there are times where we don't see, like maybe we don't see Him, but that if we wait on Him, that eventually He will show.
Exactly.
I don't know, maybe this is a far-fetched idea, but just felt a little poetic.
Yeah, I mean, maybe sometimes it does take a little bit of waiting on the Lord to see what He's going to do.
Yeah, and it was like He was waiting by faith, right? He was like fighting the... What is it? It was like he said like there's like a darkness like overcoming him.
Yeah. Like darkness behold him.
You mean sleep? No, I'm kidding.
Fighting his eyes to open.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, that's first of the many covenants that we're going to talk. Well, not many, the 4 covenants that we're going to talk about. But it's going to be an interesting series to go through. Well, that's all that we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and see you next time. Bye.
Bye.